Mdot presents The Extra Mile with Paul and Waverly.
Welcome in to another episode of the Extra Mile podcast presented by the Mississippi Department of Transportation. I'm your host, Paul Catul, joined by my co-host, Waverly McCarthy. And the weather's great out there, guys. Everybody's getting out and about, hitting up college football games, right?
Yeah, they're all getting out on the road, enjoying the nice weather.
Everyone's going somewhere, getting in their vehicles on our wonderful roads and bridges in Mississippi. However, did you know that Mdot is way more than roads and bridges? What do we have? We've got
planes, trains, buses. There's lots of things that Mdot is involved in that you wouldn't necessarily think about, but we learned all about that today in our interview. We talked with Charles Carr, who's the director of the Intermodal Planning Division here at Mdot.
Waverly, I think this was really one of our best interviews we've ever done. Charles gave us a lot of great information on the Intermodal Division, and we're excited for you guys to listen in.
Yeah, absolutely. We learned a lot about what Mdot does outside of our roads and bridges, and I think y'all are all going to really enjoy it. And along with Charles Carr, we actually we're introducing you to our newest public information officer, David Kinney. David has spent over 20 years in the Jackson area in the media. We actually worked together at my last job, and now we're back together here at Mdot. He's going to be the PIO for the northern districts. And so we just wanted to introduce y'all to him first.
All right, so we've got David Kenney here. He is the newest member of the Mdot Public Affairs team. He covers the Northern District for us. Before then, though, he worked, I'm sure a lot of people know the name, worked in the news at WLBT. David, you spent a lot of time there. How many years?
I was at WLBT for over 24 years.
So talk about your time at WLBT.
Yeah, well, I came here fairly a green reporter. I worked in Mason City, Iowa, right out of college for a couple years, and then got the job down here in the South. So, yes, I'm a Yankee. I'm from Minneapolis, Minnesota originally. But it was a great experience. I learned a lot about the state I had never been to or even traveled to or even visited to. But it was a great learning process. Learned about the state government, and everything that goes on here in Mississippi. Met a lot of fantastic people, formed some great relationships, friendships, and it was a great time working as a reporter.
And so now you have made this transition from journalism to public relations. How do you think that is going to help you communicate the key things that we need to get out to the public here at MDOT?
Right. As a reporter, that was my job and that was my craft, to be able to take information, disseminate it, and then provide it to the public in a way that they could understand it. There was always this rule in journalism when you do a story that it has to be for something an eighth grader or someone 8 years old could understand. So everything is, simplified and understandable, clear, concise, and to the point. And that is what I had, done as a reporter, and it's really prepared me, I guess, for this job because providing the public with the information about the projects that Mdot is doing is pretty much the same thing. You want people to understand what's going on. This is taxpayers' monies being spent around the state on projects to provide safe transportation for the people. So you want to let them know exactly what's going on and how it's being done.
So you've been here for a few weeks. What have you learned about Mdot that you weren't really expecting?
Well, I kind of had an idea of what to expect, and a lot of those things have turned out to be true. There's an immense amount of things going on in all different places, which is kind of overwhelming to try to wrap your head around that. But I'm in charge of providing people with information from the Northern District, and there's a lot going on there. And I was able to visit there for the first time and see exactly what is transpiring on some of these road projects, and we're getting some of that information out now. But I guess to answer your question, I didn't know there were so many moving parts and different levels to MDOT. I think I'm learning that there's a lot of different levels and different areas in the Department of Transportation that everyone serves a certain purpose, and making everything come together and making these huge multi-million-dollar road projects come together. And it's interesting to see how all these different parts work together to make things happen.
As someone who covered MDOT and who now is working for MDOT, pretty sure you have a good idea of this. Why is transportation infrastructure so important to Mississippians?
Well, in my mind, it impacts everyone, whether you're from Mississippi or even if you're visiting Mississippi. And it's extremely important for people visiting Mississippi because I think that leads to economic development. If you don't have a good, infrastructure and a good, roadmap for the future, you're not going to be able to turn the corner and, get new businesses here, new industry. So transportation is key, and it's key to keep people, in the state also. If you don't have a good transportation system, it makes it difficult for people to have a good quality of life. And if they don't have that, they're going to go live elsewhere.
And so when you were at WLBT, you covered, there was lots of statewide stories, but mainly you covered the central Mississippi. Are you excited to get to another part of the state that you've lived here 25 years and so, but now you're covering a new part? It's just can be kind of interesting.
That is exciting. And that's, one thing I'm looking forward to, the Northern District. I've been all over the state of Mississippi. I've been to the Gulf Coast, but that is one area and part of the state that I had never been to. Tupelo area, which is in District 1, that is Corinth. I've never been to that part of the state. And as a reporter, that was one of the things that I liked and looked forward to, is seeing different areas, meeting different people, learning about different things here in the state of Mississippi, and now I'll be able to continue to do that.
Absolutely. And, we're really excited to have you on board. And, if anyone has any questions for David about the Northern District, you can always reach out to him. You can get his information on our website, and we'll put it in the show notes as well. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, David.
Hey sports fans, before traveling to your game day destination this football season, be sure to download the Mdot Traffic App to help you reach the game safely. Reach your destination on time by checking ahead for crashes, closures, and construction with the Mdot Traffic App. With just one tap of a finger, you can see road conditions as well as receive traffic alerts along your route. You can even stay up to date with alerts based on your specific route to the game. The Mdot Traffic App is available free for both Apple and Android devices. For more information, follow @MississippiDOT on Facebook and Twitter.
Welcome back into the Extra Mile podcast. Before I got to MDOT, I really did think MDOT was just roads and bridges. That's not the case. Today we've got a very special guest, member of our leadership team here at MDOT, Charles Carr, the Director of Intermodal Planning.
Yeah, and we're going to talk all about the Intermodal division and what all that's involved. But first, we wanted to get to know you a little bit better and tell us about how you got your start here at MDOT.
Well, I'm fortunate enough that I predate MDOT, and I have to explain that because it sounds kind of strange. Remember, MDOT was, for a number of years, the highway department. We became, my staff and I became a part of MDOT when MDOT was created in 1996, so that all of the modes that we have now were brought into the highway department. So I've been with the Mississippi Department of Transportation since 1996.
And so you are the director of the Intermodal Planning Division. And so can you explain a little bit about what Intermodal's role is here at MDOT and what all is involved and falls under that umbrella?
Okay, I think what would help is if we kind of define two terms that oftentimes get confused or interchangeably used, and they're not necessarily the same. Intermodal and multimodal, and that's something that people oftentimes just don't differentiate between. The Office of Intermodal Planning was designed to do the kind of planning and management of the non-highway side of the DOT functions. And in the Office of Intermodal Planning, we have the Public Transit Division, the Aeronautics Division. We also have Ports and Waterways Division, and now we're bringing back the Rails Division. So those non-highway modes are what make up our Office of Intermodal Planning. And my responsibilities are to oversee those, but to primarily do the kind of coordination and the leadership so that we can develop cohesive plans for intermodal components or intermodal modes that will support the mission of the department overall.
Charles, so there's a lot of different things that go into your division, but a lot of it has to do with funding, correct?
Well, yes. Funding is a direct function of the responsibilities that we have. Okay, my office has, as I said, those various modes that we cover. So we've got those divisions that I just named, and what we have to look at is intermodal is about connectivity. Multimodal is about various modes. So when we're speaking of intermodal, we're talking about how do we manage, support, and contribute to the movement of goods and people with various modes, usually in one trip. So multimodal is we would have a number of different modes at any given time that may impact a transportation trip or impact the transportation experience itself. But that, I think, is probably the cleanest way to give it the layman's explanation. Now, your question about funding, we are pretty much a federally funded office. We have a limited amount of state dollars, but most of our dollars that we use for the various modes come from various federal grant programs that we have to administer.
And so you talked about all of the different areas of your department. Why are those important to create a safe and efficient transportation network?
Well, I would say that it's essential to understand that the network, when we look at the transportation network that MDOT supports, plans, develops, and supports, we have to have those individual components because the highway side of the transportation network is not the only side. It is the central piece to moving people and goods throughout our state and connectivity throughout the region and into the nation. But you also have those necessary components that feed into using the highway, constructing the highway, and then we have an important role to play because we can help remove traffic wear and tear or minimize wear and tear on the overall highway system. So when you look at airports and you look at rail, when you look at even public transit, each one has its own individual emphasis and primary, let's say, service that they provide to a constituent group. But it all plays together. If we're going to look at our network as a network of connectivity, where we connect people with the services and the destinations that they need, we have to use various modes to get that done efficiently and safely.
So besides getting people, where they need to be safely, efficiently, a big thing with transportation infrastructure is the economic growth and development element. How does your department help with that? How do some of the modes help with economic growth and development in the state?
Well, it varies. Each one of our modes has a unique role that it can play, and when we look at that, we try to project the economic impact. When we look at how we pass along funds to entities, be it a city, a county, or a nonprofit, one of the primary elements that we look at is what is the economic impact of our investment of funds into that entity that we can see a return on investment. So I'll give you an illustration. The airports in the state, most folks don't recognize that we have over 20,000 airport jobs that are supported by the aeronautics industry. And our investment in helping to modernize those airports, buy equipment, infrastructure development, it plays into generating over $5 billion worth of economic impact just from the aeronautics field. So it's an integral part of our overall economy.
That's definitely not something you think of the average person would think when they think MDOT.
Well, of course, most folks really, across the country, departments of transportation evolved from highway departments per se. And highway departments have a long history and have done quite a job, a manner job in creating that network so roads and bridges are the backbone of how we move people. But we had to move into elements that could be better or more efficiently utilized to take advantage of that basic infrastructure.
Let's talk a little bit about public transit. Public transit, helps people to get, really everywhere, from the grocery store to, pick up prescriptions, lots of different places. Why is public transit why is it important to have such a strong public transit network across the state of Mississippi?
Well, let's look at from the perspective we can even go global, but I'll come back to Mississippi. Bear with me just a minute.
Sure.
The national perspective and indeed the international perspective is we have to worry about climate change. And public transportation is a significant element in helping to reduce our carbon footprint. Public transportation oftentimes gets confused with a service that is either the Chicago rail line or the local bus or van system in Shibuya, Mississippi. People don't wrap their minds around it is not one size that will fit all. Here in Jackson, we have a public transportation system, the J-Trans system. And by the way, DOT does not directly fund them. We provide some support for capital improvements. But getting back to my original point, we're looking at how that public transportation service can impact the well-being of the community. It's about quality of life. So whether we're going to, as you mentioned, prescription pickups, or whether we're going to school, we're going to the doctor's office, one of the things that folks don't normally consider is that public transportation is used primarily for folks to get to jobs in most of the country. And our public transportation network in here in Mississippi is growing in that direction. As a matter of fact, our numbers show, most recent numbers show that we provide over 3 million passenger trips for education-related purposes annually. And that means that you've got folks being prepared to go out into the community, getting their education to become contributing members of society. But we also are working with major employers like FedEx and some of the other major logistics companies so that we can get employees from using the Delta is something that comes to mind. Employees who are in areas where are economically depressed now have access on a daily basis, safely and economically, to where those really good paying jobs are. So that's something we're really building and working on now. And we've got a lot of folks behind us. We're trying to work to develop that kind of network. When we think about the national and regional perspective, people often tell me, well, when I was in Atlanta, we did this, or when I was in New York, we did that. But we have to microcosm. We are not those cities. We don't have massive rail systems. We can't support that right now. But we still have people who need to get to work, people who need to get to the doctor's offices. And we're building that network of systems across the state.
Can you speak a little on what MDOT's exact role is in public transit?
And our role is essentially twofold in public transit. We are the primary funding source for rural transportation services in the state, and oftentimes some folks get taken aback when we say rural, but this is a federal classification. Any area of 50,000 population or less is considered rural by the federal definition. So when we say Hattiesburg qualifies, it's right on the cusp now, but I'll use Meridian as a better example, or Natchez. Well, they don't consider themselves rural, but by that population number that's used to award grants, they are. But it is one of those things that we have to consider when we put money into those regions. We go after every available federal grant opportunity we can. So that is to provide monies for vehicles, buses, vans, in some rare cases sedans, the money to pay the drivers, to purchase the fuel. We've even built transit facilities in Natchez, the Mississippi Band of Choctaw Indians, up in Coahoma County in Clarksdale, so that we could create a transit network in that region that could be self-sustaining. So our other role on public transportation is, with all federal money comes federal requirements. And we have a litany of requirements that we have to make sure: safety, Buy America, DBE, Disadvantaged Business Enterprise programs. It's a whole list of things that we have to monitor them for and provide technical assistance. So we're not going out to audit to say, gotcha. We're helping them to develop programs that are economically sound and safe and effective. And we've got a whole array of monitoring tools that we use, plus technical assistance activities that we provide.
And real quick, can you talk about MDOT's role helping to coordinate with the vaccination transportation?
Mm-hmm. We are not a provider of vaccination transportation. Sometimes those things get confused to folks as to the way it's being presented, but we support vaccine transportation as a part of the overall transportation, the access to transportation initiatives that we have. And we have worked with our transportation providers across the state through a network of regional groups to provide access to individuals within communities so that they, by their choice, can choose to go and get local vaccinations or even testing. And we are continuing to provide that in concert with local public health offices and community health centers and those folks who say, we have a need, can you help us fill that need? But again, we don't provide it, we help to coordinate it.
Charles, we've gotten an overview of your office and gotten in a lot of different things, but what's kind of coming on the horizon? Is there anything in the future you'd like to talk about when it comes to your office and the different functions?
One of the major emphasis areas that we're going to be moving toward, as I indicated, we do have rails and ports and airports and transit, of course, but logistics, not only connectivity as it relates to people, but goods and services from a global to a national to a regional perspective is really important. So we're moving to become more involved in how we can plan more for the changes in the global supply chain and the logistics process that has such an impact not just on Mississippi but the world. And if I can digress a moment, in the local news, you have no doubt heard about all of the major issues that are arising out of what the experts say is supply chain is broken. The months and dollars that are involved in not being able to move product from point A to point B so that consumers like you and I can get what we need and want. And that's important. A lot of this impacts not just what we would like to have for Christmas, but these are needs that we have because our economies are so intertwined on a global nature now, from a global perspective, that we're going to have to be a part of that and helping to plan for solutions, not being reactionary, but being proactive in how we can be a part of making things work.
So Charles, we just want to thank you for joining us today. We learned a lot about the intermodal division and the process you go through, and we really thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
Thank you so much.
I just want to thank everyone for joining us today. It was a nice treat to get to listen to David talk about his transition from the media to public affairs. And then talking with Charles, I learned things that I didn't know even working here. And so I think it's really insightful for all of our listeners. And we hope that you enjoyed it. And remember to follow us on social media at Mississippi DOT on Facebook and Twitter.
No doubt. And before we get out of here, be remiss if we didn't thank our awesome producer, Katie Hornsby, and our wonderful editor, Drew Hall, who works a lot of magic for us here.
Absolutely.
And as always, remember to drive smart out there on Mississippi highways.